So today I want to speak with you about something that's really important to me, which is feminism. Now I'm sure that term probably elicits all kinds of feelings in every one of you. Maybe it's excitement, maybe it's anger, perhaps fear, confusion. But I want to share with you a side of feminism you may not be familiar with. Today I'm going to share with you the ideas of patriarchy, hegemony, and feminism, and how we can achieve true feminine equality. Before we can get to equality, though, we have to understand the system that we live in now. That is the system of patriarchy. So what is patriarchy? Well, it's a system that values masculinity over femininity, men over women. Men are better. We live in a patriarchal society. Men are generally in power. They're the leadership. Men are bosses. Women can get there too, but we have to work a lot harder. And when we do get there, our abilities are questioned. How did we get there? Did we have to sleep with somebody? The terms used to describe women in leadership are unique to women. Bitchy, bossy, controlling. We don't use masculine terms such as passionate, driven, aggressive. Our credibility is never going to be on par with a man simply because we're women. This brings us to the idea of hegemony. Well, what is hegemony? Well, it's sort of like this. Basically, it is when one group tells everyone else how to conform. What looks right. Does it sound familiar? So what does hegemony have to do with patriarchy and equality? Well, in order to answer that question, we first need to understand hegemonic masculinity. Basically, it tells us that there's a right way to be a man. And if you don't do it, you're not a real man. Under hegemonic masculinity, masculine traits are king. Femininity is weak. But what happens then when our gender traits or outward expressions of how we view ourselves don't align with our sex? Well, that brings us to the concept of gender fluidity. Women can be masculine, and that's valued in patriarchy, though not as much as a man, as we've already discussed. Women can do masculinity. But what happens if a woman is feminine? Well, under patriarchy, that's actually preferred. But it needs to play to a man's sexual ego. They need to be desired. They need to be wanted. They need to be needed. But what happens if men are feminine? Feminine men aren't viewed as real men under patriarchy. They are strange, odd, and even wrong. We don't trust them. They don't have any credibility. Now I want you to look at these pictures and think about your first reactions. Do you trust these men? Do they make you feel uncomfortable? Why is that? Well, it's because of the way we view femininity. We tell our kids from a very young age that to be feminine is to be weak. It's less. It's wrong. Masculine is better. We use language like, you throw like a girl. Man up. Don't be such a sissy. Implying that a sissy is weak. Girl is weak. So what does this have to do with feminism? Well, everything. But what is feminism? Feminism has had a bad rap. It's made a lot of enemies. But true feminism, well, it values femininity just as much as masculinity. It sees the value in both gender traits. One is not preferred over another. Real feminism doesn't think men are to blame or men are evil. Just simply views patriarchy as a broken system. And it views all gender traits as equal. Masculine men are just as good as masculine women, or just as good as feminine women, or just as good as feminine men, and all genders in between. We understand that all of these genders bring something to the table. They're necessary to have our society function efficiently. So how do we achieve true feminine equality? Well, it's really quite simple. Don't buy into patriarchy. In order to do that, don't undervalue femininity. Femininity is necessary, it's good, it's right, it's not weak. Masculinity isn't better, it's not any worse, they're equal. Don't shame feminine men. When you shame femininity, it innately tells people to be feminine is less. To be feminine is weak. To be feminine is wrong. You also don't want to sexualize feminine females. Understand that feminine females bring more to the table than to play to a man's sexual ego. That's not what they're there for. They're contributing members of the society, and they deserve to be treated as such. And finally, appreciate the qualities that all genders bring to the table. One is not better than the other, but we are all interdependent on each other. If you do away with femininity, masculinity alone isn't enough. If you do away with masculinity, femininity alone isn't enough. We need all of them in order to function. And then, and only then, will we be able to truly have feminine equality.